So in Portugal, it's 1 o'clock, and in the UK. So we'll make a start. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. My name is Mariette Abrahams. I'm the CEO and founder of Qina, the Hub for Data and Insights in Personalized Nutrition. And today's webinar is co-hosted with the team at Lumiera. Allegra and Emma are joining us today. And so, as we said, we are the platform for insights in personalized nutrition. Today, the insights is on the EU AI Act and how that is impacting food and health brands, some changes that are happening in terms of the AI Act, and they will inform us and educate us all about it. So, hi, Karen. Allegra, if you just want to go to the next slide, please. So this webinar, of course, we are hosting industry-specific webinars every month now. Our next one will be on GLP-1 and how that influences personalized nutrition. Every month, the topic is different, and it's really targeted towards executives, professionals who need to stay up to date on the area and actually stay ahead in order to innovate and also influence the team internally. So with that, I'll hand over to Allegra and Emma.
Thank you, Mariette. Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here. My name is Emma, and I'm the CEO and founder of Lumiera. As mentioned, we are experts in AI. We focus on responsible AI and strategies relating to this, which is extra important for industries such as healthcare, nutrition, fintech, and others. I am from the north of Sweden. I grew up under the Northern Lights, and my journey in AI began working at Google with something called natural language processing. That is many years ago now, but before that, I was also a lawyer, so I happened to have some insights on regulations as well, and it's something that we regularly come back to in our work around strategy as well. We think that this is something that everyone should dive into, what we will be covering today. I'm really excited to share a couple of basics or fundamentals on AI literacy with you. It is fundamental and basic in the sense that it's quite simple, but it's really low-hanging fruit in terms of taking actionable steps towards just harnessing the value of AI, basically. Handing it over to you, Allegra.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, and Mariette for having us on today. I'm also very excited to be speaking today. So my name is Allegra. I am the co-founder and CTO of Lumiera, and I'm from the US. I've built my career in the tech scene, mostly in San Francisco, California, focusing on data and data enablement across mid to large size organizations. And I don't know if you can see, but I have this Garmin, this wearable. I'm a huge sports fan, and so thinking about nutrition and health and food and technology and those intersections is super important to me, especially with my background in data. I know that's something probably a lot of you can relate to, the importance there of that intersection. So yeah, very excited to be on this topic. And as Emma said, it's extremely important for all of us to be aware of and to take action on.
Yes. So before we dive into today's topic, I just wanted to share a little bit about how we work as an advisory firm. I have experience working with one of the big four consulting firms before this, and what we see is that it's so important to really get to know the problems that you're solving. And that is the reason why we run Lumiera as a boutique advisory firm where we can work closely with our clients. We have a multidisciplinary approach, which means that we have less blind spots, basically. We understand the problem from different points of view. And we do have an approach relating to responsible AI. And as I mentioned, this is something that is extra important when we are in industries that are directly impacting people's lives and our own lives as well. So it's really it's a bit of a different way of moving compared to most of our peers, but it's something that our clients tend to appreciate a lot. And we work with various types of companies. As mentioned, both healthcare and fintech are quite heavily regulated industries where compliance is important, but it's also very important to cut through the AI buzz and noise, because you also need to stay at the forefront of innovation. You need to know how to move forward with these technologies, because it does have really good potential in terms of innovation, in terms of finding your own competitive advantage. So these are some quotes from people and companies that we've been working with. And we've also been featured in a couple of different magazines in the industry. TechCrunch is one of them. It's one of the biggest ones. So it's good that we have that recognition as well. So moving over to the agenda today. This webinar will take approximately 50 minutes, more or less. We will look at what the EU AI Act is. We will look at the regulatory changes, so the risk categories of the EU AI Act, the forbidden AI systems, and AI literacy. We will also share an AI literacy checklist with you so that you can take action on some of the things that we're mentioning here today. And Mariette will also be sharing some of Qina's latest work and services.
Okay, thank you for walking us through that. So AI is really changing the food, nutrition, and health industries. I'm sure you're all seeing that. It's also just changing business in general. It's changing all of our lives and how we move with inside of business and outside personally. And we're in this era right now of hyper-personalization and efficiency. We have things like AI-driven tailored recommendations based on individual data. You know, I mentioned the wearables before that I personally use, and that's very big in this industry, especially coming up with predictive health outcomes based on the analysis of huge data sets in order to deliver that kind of personalized information and experiences, especially related to nutrition. We're also using large language models like those you might be familiar with in ChatGPT and Claude for instant nutrition information and dietary advice. Organizations are using this in chatbots, for example, where they can connect with their customers and deliver information in an easy to understand way. And it's also revolutionizing biology, and we have technology like AlphaFold, which is called out here, predicting protein structures and facilitating development of new food and ingredients and new proteins, which completely changes how we approach nutrition and food. So diving into the EU AI Act, which some of you may or may not be familiar with by now, this is the world's first comprehensive law regulating artificial intelligence. And it was adopted in 2024, and it's being phased into effect. So as of now, it's partially in effect, and Emma will dive into that timeline a bit later. And it applies to companies who have an AI output in the EU, but and that doesn't just mean if you're developing the AI yourself in the EU. This could mean if you're a company that has systems that are placed in the European Union or have customers using your system. So even if you're just a deployer, which is one of the terms used in the Act, this does apply to you. And the purpose of this regulation is really the protection of the health and safety of EU citizens. And it's not meant to stifle innovation, it's actually meant to support it by working against the harmful effects of AI systems. So diving into a little bit about that, we're in this age of information right now where consumers are completely bombarded with information, which also means they can make more educated and discerning choices. And when it comes to things like food, nutrition, and health, consumers are super selective at the moment, and increasingly so, about the products that they put into their bodies. And so trust is extremely important, and it's a cornerstone of the success of brands, which I'm sure, again, all of you are familiar with. And the importance of that cannot be overstated. It's really the foundation of the relationship between you as businesses and consumers and clients. And then on the health and safety side, this is actually a powerful differentiator. So you might just be thinking about health and safety of the products you're putting out there, but when you prioritize these aspects, you can engage in more thoughtful and thorough research, you can have more development time, and you can have resulting innovations that are actually benefiting and truly benefiting your consumers. So on both sides of the coin here, trust and health and safety are extremely important. And Emma, you can talk a bit about the impact of non-compliance.
Yes, exactly. So one of the consequences of non-compliance is, as Allegra mentioned, a lack of trust in products that don't have as much quality, and that relates to the EU inner or internal market. But another side of compliance that is also part of these big EU frameworks that the union is putting out is that the consequences of non-compliance are big. This is something that this region is taking seriously. So it's up to 35 million euros or 7% of a company's annual turnover, depending on which amount is the biggest, if you don't comply with this. And here's a little timeline of the EU AI Act, because there's a lot of dates being dropped around this regulation. And this is a simple overview of how this works. So the EU AI Act entered into force already in August 2024. We've had a phase now where companies and states have been able to prepare for this first application phase. We're starting with the most important or the most prioritized functions of the regulation, which is the application of certain prohibitions, so certain systems that the EU or the regulator considers to be so harmful that we want to make sure that we don't have them on the market at all. The other thing is AI literacy, which we will also go through today. In August 2025, so in approximately 6 months, we will move into phase 2. And that is where we will be applying the other risk categories. This is something that Allegra will mention shortly. And in August 2026, so next year, we will have the full regulation being applied and rolled out in member states. And the main changes in right now that are applicable right now is prohibited AI practices and AI literacy. So we'll start by going into prohibited AI practices. And if you do have any questions on this, we have set this up so that it's quite visual, but feel free to add your questions in the comments. We will also have a QR code that you will be able to connect with us with afterwards if you have more specific questions that you wouldn't want to mention here or that requires more time for us to answer.
Thank you. Okay, I will go into the risk categories. So the EU AI Act uses a risk-based approach to regulating artificial intelligence. So the union recognizes that there are different applications that have varying levels of risk to society. So as Emma mentioned, the way that they're phasing this into effect is starting with those most critical systems that are prohibited and unacceptable. And so this framework allows to foster innovation. So it safeguards the most important rights and ensures public safety, while also not over-regulating systems that do not pose harm to society. So I'll be briefly going through each of these different risks, and then I'll dive deeper into prohibited, which is the one that's into effect right now, as well as high-risk systems, because those are also very relevant. They'll be coming next. And in the context of health, nutrition, and food, some of those can fall into high risk. So it's important to call out now. And so as a business leader, if you take something away from this, the most important thing for you to know is to be aware of what these different risk categories are and to understand how the AI systems that you are building, developing, or using might be categorized. And that's really the first step to maintaining compliance and understanding these regulatory implications that Emma touched on earlier. Okay, so starting with prohibited. So the Act draws a very clear line in the sand with the unacceptable risk category. Prohibited AI systems pose a risk that the EU deems completely unacceptable to society, and it really focuses on AI that can be manipulative and manipulate behavior in systems that could lead to unfair treatment in very extreme situations. And then high risk, this has very specific obligations. Most of the Act actually addresses high-risk AI systems, and these are those that could significantly impact people's lives if not properly regulated, which is why the Act really focuses on how to regulate those systems. And these have to be registered in the EU database, they have to be thoroughly assessed and regularly reported on to ensure that there is strict compliance. And then on the limited risk side, this is lighter transparency obligations that are required. So this could be something like a chatbot or AI-generated content. These are very useful tools, but they could potentially be misleading if users are not aware that they're interacting with AI. So when we talk about transparency obligations, it's really examples could be like disclosing that a chatbot is using AI, that you're interacting with the AI system, that deepfakes are clearly labeled as AI generated, those kinds of transparency obligations. And this approach empowers people to make informed decisions about their interactions with these kinds of systems. And then on the minimal risk, unregulated side, this is majority of AI applications that are currently out there on the market. You can think about this about AI applications that are enhancing our daily lives, something like a spam filter, which is actually AI, it's machine learning. That's something that does not pose a significant risk to us. It's actually quite helpful, I'd say, for me anyway. And so the Act takes a very light touch approach here. So it encourages continued development of these minimal risk systems. And there are no specific obligations around those. So by focusing on those high-risk applications, we're supporting the growth of very beneficial AI technologies. Okay, so diving into the first one that I mentioned, which is prohibited, and again, these systems are the one that are part of the most recent effects of the EU AI Act that came into play in February. So prohibited systems is where innovation is meeting the ethical boundary. And this reflects the EU's commitment to protecting human autonomy, dignity, and fundamental rights in this increasingly AI and tech-driven world. And so you can see here manipulative AI systems. And like I mentioned before, that's really what the focus is on, manipulation for these prohibited systems. So it's a very firm stance against AI that can use subliminal techniques to manipulate behavior when we're not consciously aware of it. So guiding us to make decisions that we wouldn't normally make. This can, of course, be extremely detrimental in various situations. I won't go through all of these, but I'll go through a couple that I think are extremely important to call out. Another one is emotion. So the use of AI to infer emotions in workplace settings is something else that is now prohibited. There are exceptions. There are always exceptions in regulation and in law, which you can find all of those in the Act themselves. But mostly these are prohibited. So this could be something like an AI system analyzing your facial expressions during a job interview or monitoring your emotional state throughout the workday. And this might seem, cool to use, or if you're a company that is trying to do that, but it's actually can lead to very unfair treatment, which makes it too high of a risk and therefore prohibited.
Because one thing to mention here also, before we move on, is that AI is not an objective thing at all. It's shaped by data and it's shaped by algorithms that are created by human beings, which means that all AI systems are imperfect and all AI systems are biased. And when it comes to extreme environments like these, where the AI can have very big impact, those biases will also lead to extremely negative impact, which is the reason as to why these systems are prohibited.
Yes, very good call out and extremely true. If you were under the impression that AI was less biased than humans, unfortunately, it's not the case. So thank you for that comment. The last one I want to mention here, which I think is extremely relevant for the industries that you are all in, is biometrics. You will notice that this will be on the next slide as well, but there are uses of biometrics in AI that are prohibited. And you can consider things like implications of a system that could infer your political preferences or your sexual orientation from something like your facial features or the way that you're walking. So when we talk about biometrics, that can cover a large scope of data points. And if you're using those in a way that are making assumptions or categorizations of individuals and therefore impacting their health and safety and overall well-being, those are considered prohibited. Moving into the high-risk category, and these will be coming into force in August 2026. This falls into that last category. That means you have time to plan and time to really understand what these things are, which is great. So this really focuses on safety components as a large part of it as well, diagnostic tools, things like that. So if you think about a safety component in a wearable, this could be something like fall detection sensors, which is present in a lot of smartwatches, sensors to track vital signs like heart rate and fatigue. All of those are meant to promote the safety of the user. And that is considered high risk because if it is not regulated, not maintained properly, obviously there could be very negative impact. So it's not prohibited, but it definitely is high risk. AI systems that are intended to be used to determine access or admission to educational training at all levels is also high risk. And so this could be a system that's used to evaluate learning outcomes, how you're learning, how quickly, things like that. Those could be used to steer the learning process, which you can imagine could have very negative or positive implications afterwards, but that's what makes it high risk. And so that is going to be heavily regulated when it comes into effect. And then when we talk about employment and worker management, so this could be AI systems used to place targeted job ads, analyzing and filtering job applications. If some of you are familiar with going through a large amount of applications, which can happen and is often the case, you might try to use AI for that, and many companies are starting to do so in order to evaluate candidates and make that process more streamlined. That is considered high risk because you can change the course of somebody's future. And then biometrics, again, so I mentioned I would be calling it out. It is present in both the prohibited and high risk categories. And the categorization of risk really depends on the use case. One of the big differences between prohibited and the high risk is real-time biometrics. That's something that's really stressed in the prohibited section. And high risk examples of this could be AI systems intended to be for emotion recognition, remote ID systems, making different inferences of personal characteristics. I know that does sound similar, so there are some nuances towards what's prohibited and what's not, but they are called out in both. And for the obligations across this, businesses have to group the high-risk AI that they are using into these categories. So you have high-risk systems used in products covered by the EU's product safety legislation, and then those that fall into other areas, such as those that I mentioned above. Okay, that's it on the high risk and prohibited. I do want to pause for a minute and just maybe we can have one question if anybody has one. I'm not sure if we have, I don't think we have anything in the chat around
We don't
system.
have any questions right now, but if anybody has any questions, you can either type them in or unmute your mic if you feel more comfortable with that. I'll give you a second there.
I have
Any-
something that I could also mention in the meantime.
Okay.
As you noticed when Allegra was presenting these high risk and forbidden systems, the very first step is to apply these rules. And the moment that you go from theory to reality, you're going to notice that it's not as clear as it seems which systems that are prohibited or which risk category they do belong to. But again, there are some useful full frameworks for this as well, and there are lawyers and people with technical expertise that can help you understand this as well. But do map out your AI systems. Do get a sense of which category they would end up in, because that is what is gonna indicate which actions you would have to take later, and if you even can use these AI systems as such.
Exactly. Thank you. Since we don't have any questions at the moment, I'll pass it over to you, Emma, to talk about AI literacy.
Yes, exactly. So the second part of these changes that came into effect earlier this month is a requirement for AI literacy. And what is AI literacy then? You might ask. It's an expression that has become more and more common, because it's becoming an increasingly needed thing to have for all of us. And it's basically the skills and the competencies required to use AI technologies and applications effectively. And I want to point out this last word, effectively, because we do work with a lot of leaders and organizations that are using AI. But if you're not aware of the hallucinations or how you are um, giving a system the opportunity to fully understand the data that you're working with through the prompts that you're giving it, for example. And if you don't have an idea of what the different tools are out there or the impact that these tools have on the work that you're doing, you're not AI literate, even if you can use the applications as such. And this also means that the more AI literate we get, the more we become aware of both the opportunities. So this is what we mentioned before in terms of competitive advantage, efficiency, but also the risks as such, in terms of reputational damage, building products that where you have a different intention of the outcome, for example, and many other risks as well, of course, including the societal ones. So let's move on to see, this is now regulated in the Act as such. And this is what Article 4 in the EU AI Act is saying about AI literacy. They are putting the obligation on the employer. So the organizations must take measures to make sure that their staff and contractors and service provider and clients, so that's a quite wide scope, right? To make sure that all this whole group is AI literate. And there's no set way of ensuring that people are AI literate, because depending on the industry and depending on the work that you do, you might need to understand AI in different ways, because it's going to have different impact depending on the work that you do. This also means that organizations have the obligations to understand the role AI is playing in their own organization as such as well, and look at the risk and mitigate those risks properly as well. So, again, and regulation as such does not just exist to have these paragraphs saying, yes, you can do this, no, you cannot do this. And from our point of view, the way that we work, we really consider it to be a strategic advantage if you look back at the purpose of the regulation, and if you look at what you can do, not just staying compliant, but how can it take you to the next level in terms of the way that you work, in terms of the strategies that you set up. And the more that you integrate this into the different processes that you have, the more it's also going to benefit you as a company on the market. And again, that is why the EU exists as such, is to have a functioning internal market. So the first thing that we've already spoken about a little bit is competitive advantage and innovation. It really is a matter of staying relevant. So at some point, we are all going to be using AI in our day-to-day, and it's also going to be way more integrated in companies that are not direct tech companies or that are not at the forefront of innovation. So it's really a matter of keeping up as well. Something else that we've also already mentioned is the improved efficiency and decision making through the practical application of AI tools. And this, of course, develops the workforce as such as well. We have the risk mitigation and compliance point of this as well. So I mentioned hallucinations earlier, and that is when AI is making up things that are non-factual or that are not necessarily giving the output intended. So being aware of these risks, of course, means that you will end up not making expensive mistakes, or making sure that your reputation stays solid as well. It's literally not following blindly, but being aware of how we're using these. Building trust. Having a literacy program in your company and making sure that you yourself is AI literate, that really builds trust in the technology itself. And we all know this. When we start using something that is new to us, it takes some time for us to learn how to use it. But the moment we figure it out, we also understand how we want to use it and when we don't want to use it. And that is how we can build trust through education webinars, as this one. We also have a newsletter where we write specifically, or where we specifically contribute to AI literacy, but also different types of educational programs in your company or in your organization. It's very important. Cultural transformation, encouraging failure and failing forward. So making sure that you're learning from the mistakes that you're doing. Digital transformation was a thing way before AI, through the internet and other technological innovations. So having a cultural innovation and really making sure that you're also using your data in a responsible way. It is really the foundation of taking your business or your work or the types of problems that you're solving to the next level. And there are measurable outcomes of this. So the reports that we've been looking at, they have reported specific KPIs, skill enhancements, career advancements, employee satisfaction, and competence improvements. And these metrics really demonstrate tangible returns on investment in different types of AI literacy programs. And here we have a little quick start checklist. So as mentioned, to make sure that you apply all of this knowledge into your day-to-day work, we've prepared a checklist for you. We will also share this with you later in a one-side format, where you can basically go through. I would recommend for you to do this together with your team, sort of check yourselves. Do we know about the AI tools that we use? So making a little mapping of these different AI tools, looking at what the risks are, looking at what the opportunities are, and how you can improve that approach. As I also mentioned, we do have a newsletter where we, on a weekly basis, make sure to take the most important insights and add that as a little nugget that you can make sure to learn from every week. And if you do this, and if you end up realizing that you need our support on this, of course, feel free to reach out. Handing it over to you, Mariette.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that. That's a great overview. So I will just go a little bit over, of course, how we look at AI, especially when we look at the advances and the evolution of AI in the industry, and the kind of initiatives that we are working on to really help not only companies, but really all stakeholders in the industry really become more AI literate, but also how that pans out in the marketplace, and how we can help people to really assess what a solution is using or how it can actually benefit their health. So Qina is a trusted platform that connects all stakeholders with the goal to increase transparency, collaboration, and quality of the solutions. And we really aim to bridge the gap between the science and solutions by really connecting all the stakeholders in the industry, such as frontline healthcare professionals and the industry and academia, as well as industry. So our Qina services, the one side, so we've got two sides. The one is the Qina platform, and then the other side is the consultancy. So on the Qina platform, what we do is track the entire personalized nutrition industry and then see what kind of services are provided by different companies, so that we can then actually analyze the market and see the evolution over the number of years, which you can already track, which is of course very interesting. And if you think, well, why is Lumiera and Qina, why are they strategic collaboration? Is because of exactly this reason, that we see this rapid evolution and integration of AI. And of course, we need to make sure that these solutions are leveraging AI responsibly, and also that holding the solution providers or developers accountable as well. So in terms of the Qina platform, sorry, if you could just go back one. So in terms of the Qina platform, we've leveraged AI in a number of ways. So we use natural language processing to identify hidden patterns and trends within our data. So that's our proprietary data of the ecosystem, as well as the insights that we write and all our content. So we have created a small language model, so just the industry information, which we then can identify these hidden patterns and trends. And we've also leveraged ChatGPT-4, which means that you can actually ask questions on that curated repository, which what Emma mentioned about the hallucinations, if the ChatGPT only pulls from the repository, it means that the hallucinations are, of course, way reduced. But I would never say it's 100% reduced. We still need to check all the answers that come out of that as well. Thanks. So if you think about, yes, next slide, please. Thanks. Where Qina sits. So we really sit at this intersection of technology, health, society, nutrition, but within the industry, we are really specialized more in the area of personalized nutrition, where we're looking at consumer trends or companies that providing big consumer data, for example, or consumer surveys, those that are looking more into food companies, the big fours in terms of management consultancies, as well as the strategic innovation companies, which are more on the tech side. So we really are playing by combining not only our domain expertise, but also our proprietary data, and then our footprint in the ecosystem, then to leverage those insights to provide strategic innovation services and research as well. Next slide, please. So the reason why AI, of course, is interesting to us, because it is being integrated or leveraged in a very rapid way. So if you look at our data in July 2023, there are about 195 companies that we tagged as in terms of technology that leveraged AI and machine learning. And by December 2024, this has increased to 264. So of course, our database is continuously clean and updated. And so there's about 35% increase in the number of companies that have leveraged AI. If you look at generative AI, so this is how companies are incorporating ChatGPT into their solutions by actually then combining these different data sets from your biomarkers and your wearables and your diet logs and your survey information, your supplement intake, and then they layer ChatGPT on top of that. That has increased dramatically, like threefold, just in 6 months' time. So if we need to be worried about the number of solutions that come into the marketplace, we really have a very important role to play, not only to making sure that these solutions are more accurate and are leveraging AI responsibly, but that they also need to, of course, now match these regulatory frameworks. And as the EU AI Act, comes into different steps, as Emma and Allegra were explaining, that actually the companies that are playing in the industry are playing by the rules, and this is really important. So next slide. So what we have done, thanks, is last year we had a webinar with MIT. What they've done is they have a nonprofit arm, and they've developed an open source platform where you can actually create a data nutrition label, which is similar to a food label, but it actually focuses more on the data. So here the aim is really to make AI solutions that leverage AI more transparent, so that anybody can actually see what is the data that was used to train the AI algorithm, for example, where did they source their data, who actually created the algorithm. And so that's the label that they created. And they really worked with with organizations, for example, who have data sets that they want to reuse or share for other people to use within their AI system. Now, this is great, especially if you are looking at, creating more transparency and accountability in the industry. But actually, after investigating a little bit more, we came across some issues. So next slide. So if you just think about nutrition, for example, there are loads of different components that go into an AI nutrition solution. So for example, if we had to have a label, we would want to know what is the intended use. Did companies, for example, complete all the information that was required to develop a label? Which is the AI model that was used, and which population was studied? Like, which population is that solution then potentially more relevant for? And for example, was it also checked by a human as well? So these are the kind of things that we would want to see on an AI data nutrition label that could potentially then be put on every app. Of course, it's not a physical label like a food product. It would be a digital label or an online label then. So next slide, please. But the problem, of course, is that rather than working with like a data set of a molecule, for example, or looking at funding streams, nutrition is always complicated because we work with loads of different variables. And then if you think of behavioral data that is used, and wearable data, and food ingredient databases, you could have a whole set of databases just for that AI to be trained and then deliver personalized nutrition recommendation of advice. So it's not as straightforward in nutrition as it is in terms of the data label that MIT has developed. So what we are doing right now, next slide, is looking at what are the common denominators, or what are those key ingredients that need to be included in a data label that actually work for everybody. So if you think of our mission of connecting the dots, we would want to see that if we put out a data nutrition label, that actually it works for companies because they are now sharing their data or what they are willing to share, of course, transparently, but that information and that label can then actually be understood and recognized by the consumer who is actually looking for a solution that matches their beliefs, that matches their values, that matches their health goals as well. So what we are now trying to find out is what are those common topics and ingredients that should be on a label, and then if there is a label, what are those additional resources that a consumer would want to know. So if it's a food product, you can, for example, scan a QR code and then go to the company's website. So what are those additional resources that people want to know in order to understand how the solution was developed, and also if it's relevant for them, and of course, increasing the level of transparency across the board for all stakeholders in the industry. So on the Qina platform, we have one of our services called the Qina Engine, which is the entire database of the ecosystem players. And every business listing has got, a description of what they do, who their ecosystem players are, where is it headquartered, for example, the year of launch. But what we've also now done is included a section where eventually we would love to have every company within the industry then create their own data label as well, so that if industry wants to look at a specific company, they would have the business listing, they would have the launch year, they would have the solutions that they provide, but they would also have an idea of how they've leveraged AI, and in terms of transparency, what data that solution was built on. And so we would love for every company within their business listing to have their data label, and then for everybody who wants to then learn more about that solution to link out to those resources as well. So this would help, of course, for relevant stakeholders to make a decision whether it is to partner with that company, or from a consumer point of view, whether they should actually use that solution as well, because now it's really, really unclear about how that's leveraged. So what we are doing is creating this survey that we are sending out at the moment, and which will run until the end of March. And so our vision is, of course, that like the changes that are happening or simultaneously in the EU AI Act, is that it would help to demonstrate commitment to transparency of all players in the industry, and also demonstrate alignment to the EU AI Act. And again, trust is, of course, a key issue. Right now, it's very unclear about how AI is exactly integrated, or if people even know that there's AI included in the solution. And of course, as I said, raise the bar of industry solutions as a whole. Next slide. So I've put in the chat function there, the chat box, just a link to the survey. So we already have 100 responses on our survey, which is amazing, and the results so far are incredible. And so I'd love to share them as well if you leave your email address at the end. And this would really inform us on what needs to be included. So the next step would be to then understand these results and then take them to consumers and take them to companies within the industry to then see how can we align the needs of these different stakeholders to then create a data label using the MIT software, but then or open source code to then see how we can adapt that so that it is actually functional and can then be included within the Qina business listings as well. Next slide. Great. So that brings us to the end of the combined session, and we will open it now up for questions. Please type them in the chat function. We'll kick off with some questions. I already have written down some for Allegra and Emma. But yeah, think about it as in terms of your clients or the companies that you might be working with, specifically looking at food and health and how the AI Act is influencing or impacting you or your department or your network, and any specific questions you may have. So the first thing that I wanted to pose, we don't have any questions in the chat box yet, but I was wondering, within the realm of the clients that you've seen already with the EU AI coming in, how aware are companies actually? So if I think of food and health, it's not it hasn't really sunk in that actually, if I look at your risk category, it's actually prohibited or the high risk already. I can already see that. So I would love to know, what is the level of awareness of companies of the importance of, the AI Act, of what it is and what impact it has, and what are the common barriers that you have heard of what to do next about AI literacy, and defining which category they are playing in.
Well, when it comes to the purpose of the act as such, so thinking about how you build responsible AI systems, recognizing that the output might be biased and so on. Some companies are more aware of this than others, depending on the industry, depending on their values, depending on their competitors as well. When it comes to the EU AI Act as such, as a regulation in itself, we have not seen too much yet. Again, it's something that tends to get a lot of attention once the fines comes into play, or when you recognize how you can just shift your ways of working with AI to become more efficient as a team, to come up with better solutions, to do better research basically, or how to come up with new products or more high quality products, or when we see when we work with companies or with leaders that have had a failure of some sort. So they've made a POC, a proof of concept product, or they've done they've tried to start with some type of AI transformation. Maybe they've hired a technical team with people that are super skilled in AI and development as such, but it's not moving, and they don't see the results of all of these investments that they are doing. And then normally it's a matter of not recognizing the organizational part of it. So again, if you don't have people in your team or in your organization knowing how to use the systems that you are investing in or building, you're not going to get anywhere. So again, it's also quite new, it's quite overwhelming, it's moving very fast. So I would say that the lack of understanding how important the people, culture, learning, literacy side is, combined with the overwhelm of information, is a bit paralyzing at the moment. So we work a lot with actionable steps, and we help you understand, if you want to do all of this, what should you start with in order to have actionable results and cut through the hype, because it's too much hype out there right now as well, too much information around.
Yeah, great, thank you for that.
I just saw a question in the chat here from Aaliyah, so I'm happy to take this one. The question is around clients using ChatGPT themselves to help with meal planning. And in terms of the AI literacy requirements of the Act, what advice would you have around supporting clients to know the dangers when they already see the benefits? I think it's a really good question. I think a lot of people are seeing the immediate benefit of these kinds of tools and not really thinking about what's coming next. I think helping frame it in the way that they would already engage with a nutritionist, for example, they probably wouldn't put all of their trust into somebody that doesn't have a background in nutrition or understand meal planning or understand health as such, who doesn't know them personally. ChatGPT is trained, and all of the OpenAI models are trained on a vast amount of data from all over the internet, and not all of it, most of it is not vetted for accuracy, professionalism, especially not in the realms of health and nutrition. This is why platforms like Qina are so important, and where small language models are really impactful, because they are trained on data that is relevant and vetted. ChatGPT does not fall into that. It's great for general use and can be very good at coming up with answers that are convincing, but whether or not it's accurate and safe for a given purpose, that it really depends and varies. And when it comes to health and nutrition, helping people understand what how it actually works and understanding how these systems are built, what they're trained on, the inaccuracies and how they work can be very helpful for understanding what the dangers and risks are, especially if they're not familiar with how to use these tools most effectively. So knowing which data you're feeding the tool, if you're just typing in your input, in your prompt, for example, can you help me plan my week, without giving all of your biometric history and your health background, and making sure that you have inputs from a verified and trusted expert, of course, the answers are going to be very different. And you will get a response from ChatGPT that sounds convincing, but it's not based on anything. And just like you wouldn't trust a complete stranger that you haven't ever met or spoken to give you your entire nutrition plan, you shouldn't trust ChatGPT to do the same. So having that kind of conversation, putting it in very understanding terms for them on, in the human context, who would you trust, who would you not, what kinds of questions would you expect to answer and data to share in order to have a valuable experience, that should be applied in the same way to the tools that they're using. And again, to help break down a very clear understanding of the way these systems are built and the way that they function. I think that helps a lot for people to understand the risks and the dangers at that point.
Yeah. And thanks, Allegra. And I'll also add to that, because I find that people want to kind of see proof. Like, so if you have a client who says, well, ChatGPT told me to do that, you can say, well, why don't we do a query together, live, and say, what does ChatGPT spit out? And with my domain expertise, what is it that I would say? And ChatGPT clearly sounds highly arrogant, highly confident, totally scientific, giving made up references. And you can actually point out that reference doesn't exist. This is not accurate based on our knowledge. This was not taken into account. And I think because things are moving so fast and we can see the shift towards ChatGPT is so easy for people now that they want to see just that one-liner answer. Having that, doing that in real time with the client would help also to build their confidence that, yes, you can use it, but always question it, and question it preferably with your healthcare practitioner.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example and exercise to do. I would also recommend other tools that might be more transparent and effective for their use case. So if they want this sort of conversational chatbot experience, there are other platforms that leverage large language models and small language models and multimodal models that do provide citations. They do have real-time information. So, a lot of these models are trained and have a cutoff date, and they don't have access to the web. Some GPT models fall into that category. So anything they might be referencing would only be valid up to a certain point. One of the tools that we love is called Perplexity. I'm happy to put that in the chat for you as well. But something that's great about it is that it does have real-time access to the web. It's not relying on one single model controlled by one company. It's leveraging multiple models for various experiences and always provides citations. So you can see exactly where that information came from. And having that transparency and that visibility, back to the trust and safety we talked about, back to the AI literacy and the importance of that, and responsible AI practices and principles. Transparency is really a thread through all of that. And so when that's built into the system, into the experience, you'll have a much more effective interaction with the system itself, and therefore will be safer, and you'll still see those benefits while also mitigating the risk.
Yeah, fantastic.
I
had actually
a question on data privacy and personal information, but Mariette, please.
No. I wanted to build on that actually, because I also had a question about the safety, because I think, people get of course concerned about, what data is shared online, and now meeting, the AI regulations, and we can become more AI literate, questioning, but nobody really knows. Like, you can't all of a sudden check your security, or like how, you know what I mean? Like, that is totally behind a firewall, or it's really an unknown place to go. So even though you want to share and you want to get information and you're getting more AI literate, how can we equip ourselves to know that actually, or what to check, besides reading the T&Cs, like in terms of safety? Yeah. That's probably Allegra.
Well, I just want to, I mean, I know we're running out of time and
Yes.
people have to drop, but one thing I want to call out is that you do have access to controlling your settings, usually in most of these tools, and you can select for your data not to contribute to the training of these models. So as a first step across the board, I would recommend to check in all of the different tools that you use and adjust your settings to something that you're comfortable with, and to not share information with any of these systems that you're not comfortable to be contributing back to the training of those models, or for the company itself to have access to. So make sure you know what your settings are and to adjust them as goes, to controlling your data and data hygiene. So it's a small step we can all take. And we are at time, and I think for other questions, as Emma had called out, and we do have this QR code up, we're happy to provide a conversation and a call to anybody that's been a part of this webinar, so we can continue this conversation. And we will be sharing that checklist as well, and happy to share any other resources with everybody that's been a part of this today.
Thanks. Can you just go to the next slide as well, please?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So with that, our next webinar will be on the 27th of March. We are changing things a little bit. So if you want to get access to these webinars coming up, so we have GLP-1 coming up, we have AI agents coming up, do sign up to the Elevate plan. For this webinar, you will have access to the recording. You'll get some emails as well with the resources as well that you have access to. And then we hope to see you on the next one. We will probably discuss also when our next webinar will be in terms of these AI changes that are coming. But thank you so much for attending, and thank you for all your questions, and we hope to see you on the next one. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.